Right, okay. Just to give in those that weren't here, we're going to try a bit of an experiment and just record it so we can put it online and what have you. So that's why that's there, and that's why we're taking it a bit more seriously. Right, okie doke. So we want to do a few of these sort of sessions, and we thought the one that we'd start off with would be data security, because lots of people seem to have problems with not understanding links and what have you. So what I'm going to do is just run through a couple of little slides, and then we'll go on to more of a sort of demo-y stuff and explain the sort of things to be aware of. So a few interesting facts that sometimes people are not aware of. 90% of all of the data in the world has only been created in the last 2 years. So that gives you an idea of what's actually out there. I mean, this is a whole new sort of, a whole new thing, really. And the other interesting thing is that there is no such thing as a 100% secure system. So despite what anybody may say, there is always going to be the possibility that you or someone else is going to steal data from something that you use. And it's probably worth mentioning that actually the highest attack area is actually user behavior more than actually a technical. It's things like leaving laptops open, using poor passwords and things like that. A lot of this is stuff that you're aware of, but it's worth sort of reinforcing it. And also insecure devices. And dare I say, a lot of this is beyond the control of any sort of ICT wizardry. You know, it really is a matter of users actually just being a little bit more aware of it. Couple of very, very quick suggestions. Obviously, make sure that you always pin protect every device that you have. In many ways, your life is on these devices now when you actually take into account your emails and any sort of files that you have on there and social media. And it's quite surprising how many people don't even have them pin protected, Don't obviously leave them unattended and unlocked. And, be aware of what is on there, because in a lot of cases, people just have them in their pocket and they don't think about, actually, I've got a lot of personal things on this device, and maybe more importantly, a lot of things to do with work in some instances. Passwords are always going to be the Achilles heel in security, because people either reuse them or they choose poor passwords. The industry's trying to come up with different solutions. I mean, I do actually use a password manager. I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. It's a little bit of a hassle, but it's an option. The main thing, if you're not using a password manager, is to obviously use complicated passwords, use complex passwords, and I'll show you a statistic in a minute that will explain why that's a good reason. And obviously, from our point of view, try and keep that divide between home and work, even if it's just a mental model, that recognition that actually if I'm doing something at home and there's also work aspects on there as well, just be aware of that. Data breaches happen, we all know that, more and more. I think the biggest one of recent times was Yahoo, actually. I think 1 billion records were stolen, 1 billion, that's quite a lot. And this is a problem that gets a lot of people, where you use your password on multiple places, and we all to a large extent do it, and to be honest, until I started using a password manager, I confess I did as well. But when you do, your shared password is now exposed when one of the places gets hacked. So it doesn't matter how secure Amazon is, or how secure Marks and Spencer's is or whatever, if you've used the same password as you used on another site that wasn't as secure, and that's now just been breached, well, actually, it doesn't really matter. Your Amazon's gone as well. And this is why you want to think about complicated passwords. A modern PC, to be fair, albeit probably a gaming PC, so probably about £1,000, £1,500 PC, but still one that would potentially sit in a home, it can actually make up to 1 trillion, with the right software, it can make up to 1 trillion password attempts per second. So it doesn't matter how big or complex you sort of think your password is. If it exists anywhere in a dictionary, and when I mean a dictionary, I don't just mean the Oxford Dictionary, I mean a hacker's dictionary, and a hacker's dictionary is words that's been made up of these ones that have been breached. So where someone has, a shop or what have you have had their data breached, they often end up in these hackers' dictionaries. Well, it's not going to take that long before it to enumerate through a dictionary if it can do 1 trillion per second, and then obviously there's the statistics as to what actually 1 trillion is. I think it said on there 1 trillion seconds goes back to prehistoric times. It's big. So realistic goal is probably just to keep that divide between home and work. Think about who has access to devices. Again, a lot of things people don't think about. They just have the phone lying around or what have you. Ensure they're locked when they're unattended, and as we've said, practice good password management. So that's just a brief sort of like throw of facts at you, things that probably to a large extent you're aware of anyway, but is a good reminder. I think the one thing to make clear is there is no silver bullet with this. If there was, we would have done it. It's always been and will always be a game of cat and mouse. As the baddies bring up things and the goodies resolve it, the baddies think of another way. It's always ongoing, and some of them are really, really clever nowadays. I mean, to a point where you do actually think, well, actually, how can you expect people to get to recognise that? I'll show you one of those in a second, actually. But if I go onto our just going to log onto our Google page. I'll just show you. This takes me through to actually it's one thing, but actually, it's not Google. And actually, to be honest, I created that in under 30 minutes. And that was an example of how easy it is to create a login page which looks authentic. And actually, it's not. And I could have quite easily been a baddie who was now taking not only your username and your password that you just popped in, but also further information should you fill in any more. So, what can we spot? What can we look to see whether something looks all right? Because it's not good enough just to say it looked professional. I mean, a few years ago, the hackers weren't great at making neat stuff, but actually they make quite neat stuff now. So you've sort of really got to almost put that to one side, and you've got to think, okay, what other things are there? Well, this is the biggest area that people just don't seem to look at anymore. I mean, to me, I find it quite odd that people don't, but I fully accept it's because I'm coming at it from a different angle. People seem to have forgotten about the address bar when it comes to websites. The address bar tells you where you're going, and obviously, clearly, this isn't google.co.uk, it's actually on our own servers, because I'm running it on the machine next door. So that's the first thing to actually do, is to just get into the habit of looking at where the link actually is taking you to. The next thing is that if this was a site that was asking you to enter anything in, especially a username and a password, that site, without a question, has to be encrypted. And if it's not encrypted, you just don't want to know about it anyway. I mean, that would be, there are legitimate sites that are also not encrypted, but that's just very poor practice and you don't want to go near them. Any main site will definitely be encrypted. Now, in order for the site to be encrypted, it has to have a certificate. And all bar extreme circumstances, which I won't go into here, nobody can buy a certificate other than the owner of that site. So, for example, if we actually go to the real Google, you see you've got your green padlock. Now, different browsers, to be fair, do it in different ways, but the one thing that's consistent is it's a padlock. Some of them are not green now for some reason, they changed their styling, but there's a padlock that's up in the address bar. So not only are you checking that the address is actually who it is, google.co.uk, don't worry about the stuff on the end, it's the bit at the beginning that you're interested in. But actually, maybe not more importantly, but as important, is that it's got the green padlock. And if it hasn't got the green padlock, then you really want to get out of there because it won't be where you're going to. I came up with this little thing, I don't know, it just makes you sort of think about it really, called LAP, L-A-P. I just thought of it, and it's link, address, padlock. So if you ever click on a link, the first thing you want to do is to look at the address that it's taking you to, and if it's something that's actually asking you to enter any information in, look for the padlock. If any of those things are not making sense or feel wrong, then you're probably in a bad place. So LAP, link, address, padlock. And as I said, apart from very, very extreme circumstances, nobody other than Google can actually buy a certificate that actually says that that is them on that domain. So it's a very good area. Okay, how do we end up going to these dodgy sites? Well, to be honest with you, you don't normally, well, you can, but it's not normal that you Google it. It's normally that it's come off the back of an email that takes you somewhere. So, or someone has sent you a link in Messenger or something. It's not that you stroll across it, because to be honest, if you want to go to Google or the BBC, the chances are if you Google that, you will get the right one. But more often than not, people send you a dodgy email or something, and it has something in. And I've actually got a couple here that are real. In fact, this one actually came through yesterday to me. You got the same, did you? Yeah. So let's have a little look at this. I mean, first of all, I immediately knew it wasn't it, because the Apple account that it purports to be in is not what my Apple account is in anyway. But that aside, what we basically want to do is we want to start looking at things like links. Rather than clicking on them, we want to see where they're really going, because it's really, really not difficult to write a hyperlink that says one thing but goes somewhere else. I mean, we can all do that, you know. And as you can see here, report a problem. Well, actually, this isn't going to Apple. Apple's just not in that in any way, shape or form. All of these sort of ones, you know, if you click on here. So hover over the links before you click them and just see, is what's popping up actually where I'm expecting that to go? And I've got some others that are sort of made up of different ones, but verify now. Again, that one's a little bit clever because it tries to get you, because you go, oh, it is Apple. No, it's not. It's apple.id.appweb.mobi. That's not Apple. It's someone that's registered something that tries to look a little bit like Apple. They can't register Apple because, as we say, you can't do that unless you're Apple. So this is how they do it. They get around it like that. Another one that we've got. These are good ones. Click to open a dispute. Often people send things that are a bit scary and you think, no, I haven't bought that. Click to open a dispute. Yeah, and they click on the open a dispute, and actually that's where they're getting you. And here is a good example. If we hover on it, I mean, this is a really weird one. xfiles2.ru. You know, and a lot of them are Russia and Eastern Bloc and things like that, because that's where a lot of the Wild West is of hackers. It's quite renowned. So what else we've got there? We've got again things here. Click here. Well, this one's quite interesting because it looks like it's Facebook, but it's not. It's facebookwala.com. So it's just being aware of these links. It's the links that are going to get you. There is something in a second that you need to be aware of as well, but the links are going to be probably the main thing. So you get a general idea. You just hover over the links before you come across them. Now, the other things that, and these are actually quite scary, arguably can be scarier, are attachments. Links ultimately aren't going to really do a lot unless you click on it. An attachment is sort of almost invaded you. It's there. It's actually now on your computer. You know, the attachment is there, and that always feels a little bit more sinister. You know, attachments can't really do a lot unless you enable it to do it. Computers now are quite good at stopping things from happening. Sometimes it's a bit annoying because you go to open something and then you have to enable something in order to start editing it or something. But that's all done for a reason. Now, in Microsoft Office, so when I say that, we're talking Word, Excel, things like that, there's a programming language. It's been around since the beginning. It's a very, very powerful programming language in the Office suite. But nowadays, you can't run those little programs unless you are enabling them. They used to just run, and that was in sort of like 90s, why worms and all sorts got out. Now, if something detects that there is a program of sorts that is wanting to run when you open this document, it will ask you. So if you open up one of these attachments and you suddenly get something at the top that looks like that, or like that, unless you actually know what it is. Now, what I don't want you to say is never ever click on them, because there might be someone and they say, oh, I've got a macro in it, you're going to have to enable it, and then you'll know that. But, so I don't want to say never ever enable it, but don't ever enable it if you're not expecting it. Because I'll tell you now, as soon as you enable that, you could be running a program that does anything from wiping your C drive, i.e. your computer, to throwing viruses out across the network. The terrible one that's going around, it's been happening for about the last couple of years, and they've not really got a hold on it, is this thing called ransomware. Lots of hospitals and schools are getting hit by it. And what it does, it's nasty, nasty stuff. It actually encrypts all the data and then says, right, now give us £10,000 to decrypt it. So it's not the old days where it used to just destroy it for fun. It's a business now. And actually, there are some companies, and the FBI have issued guidance saying don't pay it, because actually there are some companies that are saying £5,000, £10,000 is cheaper than recovering all of our data. So actually, as a business decision, we'll pay. And people are paying. And it does work. They do decrypt it. I mean, it's an odd world we're living in, And that often comes off the back of people enabling. And I won't name them because we're filming, but there are schools around here that this has happened to. One school in particular it's happened to twice. From the bursary department, because I know the people that work there. And it's all been based on people opening things up and saying, oh yeah, enable, and then bang, and it's encrypting. And worse, in those particular instances, they didn't tell anybody. So it actually was 2 days before people, because it was in the holidays, and it was 2 days before anybody realised something wasn't right. It caused a lot of stress. So that's attachments. So with emails, you've got your links and you've got attachments, and they're the things that really, from an email point of view, are probably going to be, the areas that you need to be mindful of. I think it's also worthwhile, just at the risk of not wanting to make you all cynics, I think you just have to have a slightly suspicious view of almost everything you do, really, when it comes to emails and things. I think you just have to have that level of caution, that questioning nature. Things like the Inland Revenue are never going to send you an email saying you have a rebate. But I tell you what, in this school, there are many people that send me emails saying, is this genuine? And that's fine, I don't mind that, but it shows you the mentality, because it's almost like someone dangles a little bit, got a £500 rebate coming. It's social engineering. It's making people do things they probably wouldn't normally have done, but it's very, very clever. So I think just be slightly suspicious of all emails, not to the level of petrification, but obviously just think a little bit about it, Okay, so let's move around. Okay, this is just again a little bit of a. I just want to quickly show you something that might demonstrate the point. So we've already seen our Google page, right? This is the BBC. This is, and we can tell because it's BBC. It isn't on a Padlock one, because to be fair, the BBC doesn't need to be on a Padlock one because you're not logging into it. If I went to log in, it would. But, you know, this sort of thing can be done. So, really, really easily and really, really quickly, we've appeared to alter the front page of the BBC website. I haven't, obviously, but I've altered the representation of it that my computer is viewing, because that's how websites work. They go somewhere and they bring it down to your machine. So once it's on your machine, you can mess with it. So, you know, and as another one, we do this sometimes when we're trying. Kirsten asked me to demonstrate to the girls what, you know, what can you do with code? Because sometimes it's a bit of an odd industry, and you know, it has a reputation for being a bit boring. And we sort of do these things. Just look. Right, what have we got? Ta-da! All 99p. Just changed the price of all the jeans. Every pair of jeans, 99p. Easily done. You know, with a little bit of knowledge. So the point is that you only need to be pointed to a site that's had that sort of code put in it. It's all sorts of ways of, or go to a site that's been infected with code that's, you know. I'm not sort of saying there's a lot you can do about that, but it's just a demonstration that you don't need to be some seriously advanced hacker that's had years of computer science training to sort of do a lot of this stuff. And in fact, a lot of the more high profile ones that have been in the news, you know, where they sort of cite a teenager or something, 99% of the time they're not clever, for want of a word. They're using tools that are freely available. They're not actually doing anything. They're just going out on the dark web, getting these tools, pointing it to a website and playing go. The one that did the talk, which was a big famous one last year, he just pointed a tool at it and just said go, in effect, and it hacks their site, you know. So it's just sort of that you know, that demonstration of something just to be aware of, really. Okay, so what sort of things are out there that we can do to help us? This is a fantastic site. It's actually run by a very respected security chap who I listen to his podcast and follow him a lot and what have you. This site has it's actually just, I believe this week it's just had 1 million people subscribe to it. It's a very, very popular site. It's recommended by the BBC and what have you. It's called Have I Been Pwned? This is this new word, pwned, which means owned, if you like, by phishing. It's the hacked, in effect. And what it is, it's a database of not all, it's not an exhaustive database, it's a database of a lot of the data breaches. And you can check whether you're in there. And in fact, I think, maybe not, I think you may have been in there actually. And you can just put your address in here. I can put all these links on the VLE or something. Yeah, it was the old one that was in there. I'll tell you what, I'll do mine actually, because let me just reload that page. Can you see as well, it's a secure site. So it can slow down when there's been a recent breach and everyone starts hitting it, but it was fine earlier. If it doesn't come up soon, oh no, I've never seen that. Okay, that's interesting. I wonder whether something's happening, because he can end up being, yeah, okay. That site, when it's not under a lot of stress, which I'm now thinking it might be, you put your email address in and it tells you whether you're in any of the breaches. I will be surprised if you're not. You'll be surprised how many people are in them, whether they're Dropbox ones, the LinkedIn ones, the Adobe one is a big one. It doesn't mean that, in fact, actually, there is nothing you can do. You can't take yourself off it. You can't say, well, I want to remove myself from that breach. It's just telling you you're in a breach. So obviously, it's probably a good time to change your password if you haven't changed it since that breach happened. So, but yeah, there is clearly under a lot of stress there. So we'll move on from that one. Right, this one is actually. This is where you do start to lose the will a little bit, because you think, oh my goodness, well, how can you get around this? This happened I found out about this last week. I said that you have to, only you can register the name, if you have an internet name. So, well, it came out that there was a chap that actually registered google.com, but with what they describe as a Latin G. Now, a Latin G is really, really difficult to spot, because it looks like a capital G, but it's a capital G but it's the same size as a small letter. And he registered it, and Google are fighting him now to get it back. So that meant that he could legitimately go and host a google.com with this little g, and have a certificate and be legitimate and everything, because he owns it. And make people, and okay, he might then get caught if he started doing something sinister with it, but the point is, it's not as obvious as just checking the address. This was really hard. Now, I'm not expecting you to sort of say, oh, I'll do this, but in fact, there it is. That is it there. Yeah, that's the link I put in. That's not google.com. I don't know if you can spot that G is an odd. It's weird. You just have to take my word for it. I'll go to the real Google in a minute and you'll see what I mean. But there is a site. Well, it's not a site. It's a service called Whois. Now, Whois, you can Google it. Anyone can Google it. And what Whois does is it shows you everything about people that have registered a domain name. And it is a little bit, I agree, a little bit more of an advanced sort of tip, but it's something to be aware of. Just pop that in, is that right? Right. A Whois lookup, so all you don't need to do is to do on Google is a Whois. Incidentally, just going back to that demonstration of changing the BBC and that, there's nothing on this computer other than a browser that I did that with. There wasn't a special piece of software. That, when I brought that little window up at the bottom, you've all got that. That's part of a browser. So don't think, oh, we had something on there that changed the BBC. No, I could do it on your computer. It really is fine. And on that same note, this is also available to everybody. It's the Whois record. Whenever somebody ever registers a domain name on the internet, it gets registered with the Internet Authority. And you can see all sorts of stuff, and you will see the things to watch out for. So if you ever have a, there we go. That's a clue. This Google.com was created on the 23rd of March 2016. It doesn't sort of feel quite right, does it? I think Google's been around a bit longer than that. So it's agreed a little bit more of an advanced tip, but if you ever sort of did see a domain name, put it into Whois, and it tells you all sorts about it. And if I do the same with the real Google.com, well, for a start, can you see it's a different Google? It's a lower G that they use for a start. So, I mean, capture things, pain, aren't they? Whoa, that's a bit weird, is that right? Well, oh, actually, it's got at the top. There's me looking for it down here. It's up here. That's a bit more like it. Google.com was registered on the 15th of September 1997. So, you know, I don't know, that would have been when we registered it. So that's just, again, one of those sort of slightly more sort of advanced little tips that if you ever wanted to see, you know, who actually does own a domain name, the Whois database is freely available to everybody. So we've had links, we've had attachments, we've had that sort of just being aware of things, being aware of devices and what have you. The one thing that is probably just worth really leaving you with is this is sort of not going away. I mean, you know, we don't know what world we're going to be in, you know, 5 years, let alone 50.